Hello, friends. This is your friend Bobby. Friends, today we have a very important and hot topic. We are going to talk on famine. So, first let me explain you a little bit what famine is and related stuff, and then we will be start debating or we will discussing famine. So, what famine is? Famine is an extreme and widespread shortage of food affecting a large population over an extended period of time, resulting in severe malnutrition, starvation, disease, and increased mortality. So when we are talking about famine, there are some related terms comes with it. So we need to be differentiate those terms from famine. So one term is come in mind is hunger. So hunger is a physical discomfort caused by insufficient food, right? Sometimes we are not eating enough food, we feel hunger. So then food insecurity, it is another term used in the same sense, but it is a different. So food insecurity is means limited access of sufficient food. Then the third term comes with it is starvation. Starvation is nothing but a severe deficiency of calories and nutrition food. So now how these terms are related to famine. So famine is a large scale disaster involving widespread starvation, disease, economical collapse, displacement, and excess mortality. So famine therefore represents the final and most catastrophic stage of food insecurity. Famine is one of the most devastating humanitarian disaster experienced by the humankind. Throughout history, famines have caused deaths of millions of people, reshaped civilizations, triggered wars and revolutions. So this is a famine in the nutshell. So understanding famine therefore requires examining not only environmental and agriculture factors, but also economics, politics, conflict, and international relations. We are going to discuss this in detail. Today we have a friend, Calvin Clark. He is going to be explain us. He is from John Wirth Society. He is a coordinator of John Wirth Society. He's covering the area of North California, some portion of Oregon State and Nevada State. So what JBS? Let me also give you a brief introduction of JBS. John Wirth Society is an American right-wing political advocacy group. It is anti-communist, supports social conservatism, and is associated with ultra-conservative, far-right, right-wing populist, and right-wing libertarian ideas. Its headquarters in Grand Chute, Wisconsin, and it has a local chapters throughout the United States. Also, JBS owns American Opinion Publication, which publishes a magazine named The New American. So today we are going to discuss famine with Calvin Clark. He is from a John Wirth Society. So welcome, Kevin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Bobby. I really am grateful for the many blessings that we have from many people who have sacrificed their time and efforts and talents to discuss important truths and It was said years ago that truth pierces to the very core, and because it's always present, but often we receive truths at different times. And when a person is struggling with food, it's one of the most powerful historical ways that natural law, history, excess government, oppression has entered into the souls of the minds of and minds of people to think seriously about the most important things related to their survival, um, and uh, and to look for solutions. And so today I hope to be able to share a few solutions, as well as to discuss a little bit of the heartache of some of the difficulties.
Sure,
Um,
thank you.
so I do appreciate you, Bobby, for having taken the time to go into some deep discussion at this time. And uh, one doesn't have to look far to see where there is suffering in this world right now. Um, and one doesn't have to dig very deep to see the statistics of death and carnage that were created by many different catastrophic events. Some were well planned out as well by government. So I intend to present a little bit of information on some of the basic rules like natural law. It was said years ago that if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a civilized society, it would expect what never was and what never will be. In other words, you can't really understand freedom and be ignorant at the same time. And especially if you want a civilized society, Thomas Jefferson included that. His quote is often leaving out a civilized society. And we've seen civilized societies rise and fall over history.
Yes.
And how did they fall? Some of them fell by uh, too much governmental power and no meaningful restraints to government, and the pride and ego and vanity of leaders thought that they could do no wrong, and they thought sometimes that they were above the people. And we've seen that through many historical things. The John Birch Society has worked to publish the real history as a good summary. They just publish the real history. A lot of people do not find the real history because we're flooded with much bits and pieces of truth, but also we're hit with a lot of propaganda where it protects the powers that are trying to continue on in their what we call a monopolistic capitalist, not free enterprise capitalism, but monopolistic capitalism is a dangerous threat economically. And often what goes with in our one of our great videos on jbs.org is called Overview of America. And it basically boils down that in a type of limited government called a republic, you either have a rule by law, or the opposite of that would be what's called an oligarchy. And that's a rule by a few who get
Mhm.
together. And we've seen that when you boil down all of the types of forms of government, there's only two left. And that's a republic, a rule by law, or a rule by a few. And the few often create many different forms of actions like anarchy. They often create chaos in the streets, and then people will want to have government fix it instead of catching the few who are creating that and prosecuting them and holding them accountable to the law. So there's limited government, there's no government, and then there's unlimited government. And so the right balance is to have a rule by law which holds and checks and balances those who are doing things. So that's a really simple summary of the John Birch Society. They're about education, the real history, and helping to increase our understanding of how legislators in the United States are voting, and whether they're voting to cause famine and destruction and monopolistic capitalism to overtake some of the countries and even our country. So I would love to share an overview of several points on famine and some of the solutions to that. So let's go ahead and pull that up, and I think we'll be able to enjoy this simple version of information. Yes, and I will pull that up right now. Let's see. Oh, let's see. I kind of lost you. 1 second. Oh, there you are. Okay, here we go. We'll share. And here we go. And we'll drop over to this little, can you see this okay?
Yes, I can see it.
So this is a little summary I put together that organizations like the John Birch Society and our magazine, The New American, we interpret famine primarily through the lens of limited government, property rights, free markets, and national sovereignty. And so we know what it's like to have freedom without monopolies. And what stops famine is having that freedom to grow and to farm, to get access to water in a reasonable way. Their recommendations, our recommendations, differ from some organizations like the United Nations, who believe in unlimited governmental power, the World Bank printing more money out of thin air, and these false NGOs, these false nonprofits. There's some that are good. Many nonprofits are good, but many of the nonprofits seek to create a narrative that blames humans, and humans are the problem, and they create carbon footprint and things like that. So here's a summary of some of the things that we can do. And we recommend you look at it from a constitutionalist viewpoint, not a totalitarian viewpoint. And a constitutionalist viewpoint is a limited governmental viewpoint. So
Good.
number one is to protect property rights. And having property rights is the right to use, dispose of, create, modify, change, sell, buy properties to be used for proper and reasonable planning and reasonable purposes. The production of food is probably the most fundamental and primary need that we have to survive as some call us a species, some call us children of God, endowed by our Creator. And so we want to survive. And some of that survival requires the use of private property. Now, with the advancements of property, we have long-term investments. We see our confiscatory aspects where people are trying to take away food production by endangered species lists, by control of the water. We've seen that in Central California, one of the greatest breadbasket production areas in the entire world. California could essentially feed most of the United States alone, as well as probably 50 to 100 other countries. The production here is significant. And then you have Nevada and certain places, and across the U.S. There has been a significant amount of food given to foreign countries, which has supported killing the people, even though we helped with trade to some of these countries like China and Russia. And they've taken purchased some of our food or granted it when they have a famine, and then they continue down a path of totalitarianism, controlling the private property rights. So that's number one. The solution to that is to protect private property rights. Now we're going to move. Do you have any questions on that, Bobby?
So exactly what I want to say, there is a saying, actually, World Economic Forum says, you own nothing and be happy. So, what do you want to say about it?
Yeah, that's really important to look at this concept of who is saying things like that, and we do have some of the global uh, dictators
Mm,
who have come out, like Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum's meetings, and they have promoted. And we're going to cover some of that, some of their goals for the world, called Agenda 2030, in just a few minutes. But we have seen those plans fail over and over and over. It doesn't matter which country tries to do them; it tends to continue to fail, and it's a
mhm.
real
Oh,
dangerous problem. Hmm.
but I can say that, so if we can divide feminism, mostly I can divide it into two types of famine, the natural famine and then man-made famine. So this man-made famine somehow related to the property rights because they can want to be, manage the famine such a way that farmers can start losing money and eventually they will stop seeding. And once they stop seeding, they cannot control their lands, and eventually they will end up selling it to the bigger corporates. Eventually, you own nothing, things will start from there. What is your take on it?
I thank you. That's really I'm going to give my personal view a little bit, and I would
Mhm,
say that in our modern time, I don't know of any famine that wasn't created in my
mhm,
lifetime.
mhm,
Going back into the 30s, probably things that happened in Russia and China and other places, Ethiopia in 1985. It always ended up being people who would not have good policies in their country, and they took the gifts from all of the prospering countries, and mainly America. America's had the capacity to feed all of the countries during their famine, and they've done that many times, and were taken advantage of. The people who were starving were not the recipients of the donated food. So I don't want to say for sure they're all created, but I think if you read the book Death by Government by George Rummel, who was the historian on
Yeah,
this subject, and that book is called Death by Government. And
yeah,
he listed that between 1900 and 2000, over 175 million people were killed by government. Some was war, some was famine, some was isolation and torture and other things. So, um,
yeah. So similarly, Bengal famine in 1943 in India is created by government, right? So that's another example.
Yeah, and these things should be discussed. This is so we don't repeat history. It was said if we don't learn from history, we're bound to repeat it. Thank you for mentioning that. But the investigation side, the solution is education, is
Exactly.
is is the power to. And thank you for hosting this to discuss some of these things. Property rights. A lot of it was famines created when they lose property rights, and
Yeah.
so we'll jump right back into number two then,
Please go ahead.
which is let's pull that up again. There we go. And I think I need to expand this. I know we have a okay. And number two, eliminate price controls. When prices go up, there's often a reason. Is the government printing more money than it has backed that's backed by gold or silver or commodities?
Mhm.
Often prices go up, and then the government manages the other side of it, and they start setting price controls so that they can take over the smaller farms. So they'll give out grants and subsidies. And this was written much about by a gentleman named Ezra Taft Benson, who was the Secretary of Agriculture under Eisenhower in 1958 through about 62. And he published a lot of books. One's called Freedom for Farmers, and it was all about the price controls of subsidies, giving subsidies to farms when those farms were not needing that, but they were told that they had to um, produce a certain amount of food, which created shortages on other types of food.
Mm.
And so, for example, when you use corn, corn's a high water using product growing. And so it uses a lot of water. And when there's a little bit of a weather change and everybody's planted corn, and then eventually there's a little shortage some seasons, instead of letting the spectrum of free enterprise just grow what you want to grow,
Mm.
plan on what you want to plan. And then the government started getting involved in different conditions like creating famines because they wanted more power. They didn't want a certain tribe or uh, uh, ancestral group of people. They wanted to control the free enterprise parts, and so market prices uh, should encourage production and efficient distribution, but they don't, and that's the problem. That's why eliminating price controls is an essential part of property rights. Once government gets involved, it can be a dangerous thing. Any questions on that? That's
Professor,
something to
please carry on.
yeah, that's something to look into wherever you live throughout the world. How much price controls are happening? And then you have energy price controls, the transportation. Like in California, we've seen close to $1 or over $1 of just fuel tax. So you go out of the state of California, you go to another state, and gas is $1 less, which makes the food production easier to transport and less price. And that encourages free markets, number three. And so the solution to encouraging free markets is to be educated about the free markets and understand from a freedom perspective completely why freedom is important with free markets. And so that there's competition. That's one of the key things. You can buy potatoes over here or you can buy potatoes over there. You can go to uh, totalitarian overtaking of countries, and then there's all kinds of free markets that will happen when people become free. Singapore, Hong Kong, post-war Germany, and of course they had to be bailed out first to get started back into freedom. And those show where failures happened before as well. Reducing government regulation on farmers.
Yeah.
This is kind of a general statement, but it has to do with things like licensing. Wow.
Mm.
Restrictions on environmental water controls. Oh my goodness. The quota, you have to plant this, you can't plant that. And if you don't plant this, we're going to tax you more. And then the
No.
transportation by overregulation of different energy costs, water, and things like that. So the claim is that
They are also
unnecessary
controlling the
regulation.
prices, right? So if they knowingly give more price for a certain crop than the other one, so farmers can go for certain crops to make more money.
Yes, yes. And when they say you have to have price controls
Yeah.
for your type of food and product that you're developing, then they destroy your free market by importing, like what they've done in the United States, in California primarily. They'll bring in a bunch of fruits from Central and South America with no tariffs on it and wipe out the farmers in California where
Yeah.
they can barely make it. So, how does government regulate your farming right now? And knowing the answer to this question is really, really, it kind of covers all of the previous points, property rights and as well. So, and then you have collectivism, and this has to do with different uh, dangerous amounts of consolidation of power. We've seen that in Europe with the Dutch farmers, and I have a picture in here about that. We published a little bit about that. And
Mhm.
so centralized control contributes to catastrophic famine. Let's not let the people have too much food. They have to grow their own food. And then we're going to tell them how they can grow their food. We're going to tell them what food they have to grow. We're going to tell them when to grow. We're going to tell them almost everything, how they can transport. And then once they get done spending all that energy, we're going to say, oh, well, the government owns all of your farm anyway. So you don't have the right to sell it and make a profit. You're too rich. Let's blame the rich people now. And so
Hmm.
then we want to tax billionaires, is what they want to do. They want to centralize all control. And that's a dangerous step.
Good.
Yeah. So then we want to maintain a stable constitutional government. When we hear the word constitutional, we should really consider that that just means a rule by law where the people have representative government and they can hold their representatives accountable. And they can also require that they disclose and disclosure of contracts, how much property the government owns, how much local agriculture is regulated, and what we can do to free that up. Should we discuss the data of commerce? What is really happening? Who's controlling the buying and selling? And so this really is just like, uh, as you've seen, the constitutional restraints. You will have less likely the government to confiscate food, seize farms, impose destructive economic policies, and this is protected by contracts. And contracts have to do with honest contracts. A contract is an offer, an acceptance, and some form of consideration, and that means an agreement or an action. And so they've used contracts to say, well, you can accept this money if you do this. And so contracts have been used for good and bad, and we want to restore honesty to contract law. And that has to do with honest disclosure, the parties involved, what the markets are, and what the opportunities are to sell on the open market. And that includes getting into, local food production. Up in Idaho, they started to make regulations where you can't even have a local farm on your property without licensing. And we covered licensing a little bit earlier. A
Mhm.
license is a binding agreement that allows government to penalize you if you don't do exactly what they say. It's one step to serfdom. It's one step to complete domination by a new landlord that even though you own it, you don't control it. Licensing loses control of your local farms. And so family farms are really nice to have. I wanted to talk a little bit about being prepared. I was driving across an area and I looked out at the beautiful horizon. And I thought, what would happen if a nuclear bomb went off right now? What would I do right now to survive and not have a famine? And I thought, oh, I'd have to get water before it gets contaminated. So I'd need a water bag to store water, to just go to anywhere, a creek or anything, and pull any of the water out. I'd rather drink parasite water than radiation water. And so these are kind of prepared things. We'll talk about preparedness in a minute. So family farms, regional food production, agricultural independence. This is what made the states great again. Instead of making America great again, the only way to do that is to make the states great again. And the only way to make the states great again is to make local farms great again, family farms great again, regional food production, where people work together in their region. There's more water in some areas than there are in others. And
Yeah.
when one region works with the other region, they say, can we maybe get some water this year from you guys? You had a great winter. So why don't you ship it on down? And making it affordable has to do with agricultural independence. Yes, yes. So resilience as Americans, as members of your community, as a local neighbor, Resilience has to do with being prepared for what might happen, what supply distributions. And as there's been storage facilities built on purpose to store grain, that's been a significant, reliable backbone of balancing the market and keeping things postponed inflation for another year or two. And that way we can keep the balance of continuation, consistent income, consistent incentives for farmers so that they don't just sell and move out with one disastrous winter or summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Encourage voluntary charity instead of centralized relief. This has to do with how do our private entities work? Are we looking at honesty in these organizations? Are we looking at government intrusion into these organizations? And we've seen more blessing by these organizations than we do from government charities. There's no such thing as government charity, in my opinion. It's government false philanthropy. We're going to give you something, and then you have to sign a contract. And then we're going to require that your organization that jumps through hoops. And they've tried to do that with churches. And thank goodness for the First Amendment of the Constitution, of the Bill of Rights that restrict the power of government to take over our private charities and churches and just do what they want to do. And that's that we're seeing a major competition between the free enterprise and also the contracts that we make that are good to help have good churches, charities, private charitable farms and organizations and free institutions. The danger of too much government and monopoly power is when we let government redistribute the charitable organization's food. And so it goes from farm field to the plate, to the dining room table. And if it doesn't go all the way without if it goes all the way without too much regulation, it's affordable and no one will starve. Mm-hmm. So this is really important that we respond efficiently and with greater accountability to government. We get them to be accountable to us and flip the coin. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Expanding free international trade. This had to do with that comment I had about Central California and southern Central America and southern South America, where they built up a lot of Chinese-funded trade programs, farms, and then they come in under certain tariff contracts, and they come in and they are able to destroy and create even shortages. They raise their prices or lower their prices depending on what their agendas are. So that's really important to look at in whatever country you're in, to look at are there conservative economists generally support reducing barriers to trade so food can move more freely across borders, which creates free enterprise capitalism, which is what we want. Free enterprise and the ability, the capital is your tractor and the capital is your tools and your land to harvest the food from. And then we are humans. We're not capital. Capital is a means of production. And when governments get too big, they make humans the means of production. And that's a really important thing in economics to understand. Otherwise, you are the capital and you work for government. And some people used to say the Tax Freedom Day was in May, and now they say it's in August or September or October. By the time you pay the fees, fines, levies, liens, regulation, taxes, and gas tax and other things. So prevent government corruption and tyranny. That's kind of what we're talking about. Stop confiscated crops by government, including ranches with animals. And animal control has gone into a crazy level of power where they say locally, you have injured an animal or a chicken, or several of your chickens have died from high heat when we have a hot summer, and they lay them out like they're humans that were murdered by some cartel on a border somewhere, and they take pictures of them, and then they go after and they confiscate all of the chickens of that farm over a few dead chickens that happen under normal life in the circumstances of the weather.
Oh, I
This
want
is
to add one more point here. You brought up the livestock. So
mhm.
I think it happened in Holland or Norway, right? Where government jump in and they will saying that farmers cannot keep livestock because of environmental issues. So what is your take on it?
Yeah, there's a lot of detail in that question because much of the tyranny is inseparable from other parts of the tyranny that are undisclosed, and people don't recognize that you connect the dots. And if you, for instance, a confiscation is connected with many of the other parts of this problem. And the other parts that lead up to confiscation is an uneducated citizenry, people who have allowed continued incremental confiscation through Fabianistic and Hegelian strategies, different strategies the government has used, licensing, and eventually they favor certain um, um, legislators, friends, business, and they want to create monopoly capitalism using the force of government. And this is a dangerous problem, and it's constant. It's been going on for quite some time. The incremental socialist program of working the farmers into poverty is one of the steps as well. And I have a quote on that coming up that I'd like to share with you about that, about what those plans are. And also the list of the Klaus Schwab Economic Forum, World Economic Forum, of what they think collectivism and food rationing and all these things that they want to implement.
So,
Well, free enterprise
so
doesn't
you will
allow any of
continue
that.
with your slides.
Say again.
You will continue with your slides if you
Oh,
were.
very good. Yes, we're almost done with this wonderful, but that is a fantastic opportunity to discuss. Thank you so much for the discussions on these things. Is really so vital. So restricted movement, incremental limitations, including roads, getting access to your farm. Many of the environmentalism has done that. They've said you can't get to your farm because you're crossing over a sensitive area, things like that. So here's a great quote from George Rummel. Absolute power kills absolutely. So there has to be a limitation on power, a limitation on government. Government is power, George Washington said, and like fire, it's a fearful master. And this, George Rummel's broader thesis, that he's saying simply unchecked governmental power has been a major contributor to mass death, including deaths associated with some famines. So we're getting right back to famine. What's contributed to famine? It has been concentrated, unchecked governmental power. And this has resulted in a lot of what we've called pandemics, planned famines, planned. And they are very, very tactful in looking like they're ethical and moral, but in reality, their strategies and tactics were all designed from a think tank. And here's some resources for you: the John Birch Society articles on property rights and constitutional government and free markets. I'd love to get into a little bit of that. And The Road to Serfdom, some great books here. The Law by Frederick Bastiat looked at American production in 1850, and he said that America is producing so well because they have the law. And the law is, he said, organized justice, and justice having a basis in morality. There is a right and a wrong. But when you let government eliminate the discussion or the conversation, we end up in a very dangerous place. So I wanted to ask you if you have any questions and maybe go through some slides if we have a few more minutes.
Yeah, but definitely we need to be discuss a little bit more. I want to be tell you a couple of analysts, researchers, discuss or talk on famine. Michael Yon is one of them. So he talk about giga famine. So he said that giga means billion. So So a giga famine refers to a famine of a scale that could kill or displace billions of people. So it is Michael John who is saying that. Again, John has been warning about this since 2020, arguing that the current crisis is orchestrated, sorry, not the result of drought or natural disaster, but of a deliberate policy decisions, which you also mentioned. So he was saying that deliberate policy decisions that are dismantling the energy fertilizer systems that allow just 2% of population of feed the other 98%. He believes the conditions are already set and the famine is now unavoidable. That's what Michael John mentioned. So he was saying that billions of people will be affecting with this famine, and this famine is deliberately introduced by some forces. What do you want to say on it?
If you have the time, um, and I want to talk about time because
We have.
time is valuable. And every day we watch enough blue screens and TV and shows and news, and we're not preparing. Most of the people. I don't want to say most of the people because I sound like I'm blaming good people. But a lot of us have not really invested the time to understand self-reliance. Self-reliance is an essential um, part of our identity. If you want to go to the store every day and buy your food, you're going to waste time and gas and energy. But if you sit down and you plan and you prepare what it is and you study and it's very important. This is a very important concept because time goes by so fast. And if you set goals, but base your goals on the most important knowledge and wisdom that has been brought forth. We already went through so many famines. We already have so many people that understand that a prepared um, a non-ignorant society will do those things. You
Yeah.
guys will do. You will invest that time. Where and but that's not enough. We need to duplicate that effort. Duplication is the key to avoiding a famine. Duplicating the truth. Truth is the knowledge of things as they were, history, as they are today, present, and as they will be tomorrow, based upon statistical views, which is not the only view to look at, but it is a valuable one. Statistics do point in a certain direction, and that's, I think, what you were referring to. There are going to be and always will be people who think that no one else knows what they know, and they're going to tell you something that you need to know. And they, when it comes to famine, that it's already too bad, too late, that there's nothing you can do, so why try? And so it can be very discouraging when we criticize. It's a
Yeah.
lot better when we educate. and we help duplicate that education of being prepared.
Oh,
And having a 72-hour kit, like today, right now, consider all the stores closed, you don't have access to food, and go
mhm.
lock yourself in your house and see what you're going to do. And not knowing whether or not the stores or the food lines or food production will happen. And if you challenge yourself and you run through a scenario and then you look at your children and you look into the face of these little innocent people who are going to rely on you to be fed, and you're going to be going to the store every day to get your food, never thinking that those stores may close. I was in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, when the October 16th, 1989 earthquake happened. It was a
Mhm.
7.1 magnitude earthquake, and it broke all the chimneys of all the houses all around Santa Cruz Mountains, and it collapsed freeways. It immediately the fuel stations were closing. They ran out of fuel. Immediately the food on the shelves was gone, and we saw everyone have a very big pause. And when you pause, inspiration happens, sadly. You don't want it to happen from crisis. You want to you want to pause
Yeah.
before the crisis and think of what you can do. And
So, okay,
mhm,
Calvin, because we are running short of time, let's quickly some other points before
okay.
we close, right? So, the other question, which is quite related to famine, how is food directly dependent on energy, and how does that make the food supply so fragile? So, if you look at it, modern food production is entirely mechanized. Fertilizer is made from natural gas. Diesel powers the tractors and combines. Mechanized irrigation, harvesting, and transportation from a tightly linked chain. If any input, diesel, fertilizer, seeds, is disrupted, yields can drop by 50% or more. Unlike historical famines that unfolded slowly, today's just-in-time supply chain carry on no buffer. There are no warehouse or reserve foods. So a disruption hits fast and hard. Because, because of this transportation, nowadays we are depends upon, uh, supply chain with no buffers, right? So it will drop yield from 50% by 50% or more. So no warehouses, no reserved food nearby because of this particular transportation. Food is daily moving from one place to another. So that is another issue, that energy is a key to famine. The wars like Strait of Hormuz or any other places which will disrupting the oil movement or gas movement or the overall, uh, they are closing those straits, which will definitely create a problem for food moving from one place to another place. What do you want to say about it?
Yes, it's essential that food production and transportation are inseparable, and that we know that, and that
Yeah.
we are active in preserving both food production and transportation. The challenge to do that has to do with two things: knowing what we're for and increasing that education in truth, and knowing what's against us on both the production and the transportation, the reception, disposal of, and use of property, all of that. But transportation, it will probably end up that we will that we will have, many of us are going to learn the hard way that we should have stored up some food, been more independent from government, uh, encouraged our neighbors and communities to also be prepared by growing food year round and working together in co-ops.
Yeah.
Um, up in Idaho, that was a very successful procedure. Everybody helped each other succeed. They demanded access to the water. They built dams. They forced the federal government to not overregulate, and they were very much involved in state sovereignty, the right of the state to produce. And we've seen Idaho produce so much, and they've had access to so much water. But other states like California, we see where um, that, and I sat in a lecture the other couple of years back, and a gentleman brought 3 bags of groceries, and he said 3 bags of groceries. 2 full bags of groceries were food that had to be shipped in from out of state, from out of the area. 1 bag was local produced within the state. So when you look at jurisdictional transportation regulation, you cannot avoid looking at how the state is managing, or your local regional government, how they're trying to manage transportation.
Yeah.
So the defense to all of that has to do with local and being self-reliant. Storing fuel is very difficult, it's expensive, and it's overregulated. So there's a lot of problems with you being the person who transports all the food. We usually go to the store, and that's where the big semi trucks have brought in food. But once that gets cut off, then we should plan as if it's going to happen. Do a drill, which means a mock trial of your own sustainable life. Am I going to survive this month if I don't go to the store for a month? And try and figure out, do you have enough storage? And that will help prepare. So then also 3 things. We have to be better than government. We have to not steal from our neighbors and things like that. Second, we need to learn the principles of limited government, the Constitution. Why those clauses limited government? Why limited government is important? Why a republic is important? Third is we need to be involved in our civic duty as being involved in government and understanding what they're doing. And fourth is to actually be representing the people and encourage governments that don't have that to have
Oh,
representative governments.
okay. Calvin, we have another 10 minutes.
Okay,
So if you want to share your slides quickly, take 5 to 7 minutes, and then we will be do the final conclusion and wind up the call.
great. So a couple of things that's well believed out there in the world, pretty much in America, is that our rights don't come from government, that we were created, the heavens and the earth were created for us to use. The founders believed um, that our truths that are self-evident is that we're all created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which includes the ability to not steal, which means ownership. And some of the ancient rules were don't steal and don't covet your neighbor's property. So ownership of property was an essential part. And so when we consider scheduling our priorities, we should schedule our priorities and not our schedule. So we should look at what is a priority and how we can do that. And then this gentleman here, Ezra Taft Benson, was the Secretary of Agriculture under Eisenhower, and he said back in 1958, and he came face to face with Nikita Khrushchev, but he knew about American agriculture, and he did say, in the days of Noah, men had no greater responsibility than to repent and board the ark. And then he said, in our day, we have no more greater responsibility than to protect the freedom vouchsafed by the Constitution of the United States. You want to avoid a famine? defend the Constitution, limit government, get government out of farming, over-regulation, stop the over-regulation. Cicero kind of talked about this a little bit when he said, if we want to, just as a builder, to have a plan on paper in order to build wisely and well, so must a people have a constitution in order to guide them. But we have abandoned our plan and our map so painfully wrought by our fathers. Hence, we have dictators, men who lust for centralized power in order to oppress us. This is back in 64 BC. This is some powerful language. Hence, we have dictators. Douglas MacArthur said, the history of failure in war can be almost summed up in two words: too late. Too late in comprehending the deadly purpose of a potential enemy. A potential enemy. And then too late in realizing the mortal danger, the current mortal danger. Too late in preparedness. Too late in uniting all possible forces for resistance. So this is a very powerful quote that we should understand. Understanding the current threat, the real potential threat, and then preparing to go through that. So preparing our minds is also good to understand the law, reading the Constitution, proclaiming those truths throughout the world, helping others to understand the threats to freedom. Nikita Khrushchev said in 1959 to Ezra Taft Benson, he said, you Americans, and this was a communist dictator, he said, you Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright, but we'll keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you'll finally wake up and find you already have communism. We won't have to fight you. We'll so weaken your economy until you'll fall like overripe fruit into our hands. So this is one of the reasons why we must be involved in preserving farming and limiting government overreach. And that will stop the economic fluctuations that cause famines. And because the founder of the John Birch Society had it so well understood, he did say some comments about this. He said, right under our noses, communists are gradually carrying out their plan of a grand strategy, as already described, which is so to change the economic and political structure of the United States that it will be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union into a one world socialist government. And so one of these one worlders was Klaus Schwab, and what they produced at the Economic Forum was that they want to be in charge of eliminating poverty that they created already. They created it, so they want to be in charge of fixing it. They don't want hungry people. They created hungry people. They want good health and well-being, good education, their education. Don't think outside the box. Gender equality. All these different things can be damaging to a civilized society, sustainable communities, cities and communities. What's that? Why would you want industry and innovation and infrastructure be under one world government and control the water and what's under the water? Climate action, and you touched on that. That's a significant one. And
Okay.
so on the surface, the United Nations appears to be, very similar to our federal government, but it doesn't go any further than outward. And a lot of folks have never compared the United States, which is founded on a concept of limited government, to the United Nations of unlimited governmental power. And that's what this is, unlimited governmental power. So in closing, we have to do something. We have to stop first by understanding what is going on and be involved in turning this socialist, totalitarian, globalist humanism, its false ideas. We have to be aware of what these false ideas are, and we can do it. Robert Welch was the founder of the John Birch Society. I recommend you go to jbs.org, and it doesn't take a bunch of people. It just takes a few people to really wake up the rest in the community and the area and the state, and get them, excited about freedom and light that up and excite them in their minds. So thank you, Bobby, for letting me share some of that. And And we've only touched on a portion of many things that you can do. And to study and pray and have faith and be encouraging and doing something that makes you feel good in your heart, that you've done something good, you've helped your neighbor, you've weed whacked their yard or gone over to help them when they're, or if they have an injury or something, take them food, be a neighbor, be a good neighbor. And that really is essential. And why would we let government take from our neighbor what we shouldn't be able to take from our neighbor? And that's another basic concept of historical ancient
Yeah.
rules, you know, that we
Mhm.
try to do. So I pray that we won't have famine and,
Yeah.
having a year's supply of food. A lot of churches, a lot of organizations have recommended that their people be prepared, they and volunteer, doing volunteer work to help people, feed people, find somebody that's starving or hungry and giving up hope and help them. It really fills your soul with good energy and good feeling.
Yes. Okay. Uh, Thank you, Calvin. Let me conclude our talk. Uh, so jump in wherever you want to add your point. So I'm basically concluding it. So famine is among the gravest failure of human society. Although natural disasters continue to threaten food production, the majority of modern famines arise from the combination of conflict, political instability, economical collapse, governance failure, and climate-related stress. This means that famine is increasingly preventable if our government wants to prevent it. So, in the 21st century, humanity possesses sufficient knowledge, technology, and productive capacity to prevent most famines. The challenge is no longer whether enough food exists globally, but whether societies and governments can ensure that food reaches those who need it most. Ultimately, famine is as much a test of political will and human solidarity as it is of agriculture production. So, Michael John advised it, so I'm just reading directly from his quotes. So John's core advice is know where your food will come from, not where you will buy it. He recommends thinking in terms of years of food storage, not weeks or months. Moving away from large cities, which will become more dangerous quickly once food is cut off. Learning to grow food or connecting with those who do, finding it a local farmer or gardener now before the crisis. He also warns that governments will seek stored food, so community level resilience matters more than individual stockpiling. So this is what basically coming from Michael John. He is very vocal about famine. So I just read his quote. Uh, Kelvin, do you want to add to it, or we can wind up the call?
Well, thank you. What his key central point is us, is we the people. We have to do
Mhm.
it if we are to succeed. It's really up to each one of us to not prioritize our schedule, but to schedule our priorities. And
Yes.
is this a priority to avoid a famine? Um, yes, it is. Do we see a need? I think it doesn't take much to look around and see the need for us to be more prepared and putting food under your bed, putting food in places. And there are good dry goods that will sustain you, that will get you through difficult times, even the loss of employment or the loss of where you need to budget and get out of going to the store and spending. Food prices have gone up so much. I went to buy an organic apple and it's 250 cents. People don't talk
Oh,
about cents like 200 and cents, $2. We say
$2.
$2.50.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of money for a healthy apple. I could eat 3 apples a day. I mean, and that would be $7. And that would
$7.
be $210 just in apples a month. And that's a lot of spending. So balancing by knowing what exactly Mr. John says is getting your food sources understood, where it's coming from, and being able to be self-reliant. Thank you so much for that. That's wisdom, for sharing that.
So, thank you, Calvin. Thank you for your good talk. Uh, Friends, you have already listened Calvin on famine. So please comment, like, and share our video so that more and more people can learn about famine and also try to protect themselves and their families. Thank you very much, Calvin.